Hello, grade 12. In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at organic chemistry, naming alcohols, aldehydes, ketones, and carboxylic acids. Now, when naming alcohols, we have to look at these 4 steps. Number 1, you count the number of carbon atoms in the long chain. Number 2, you write out the correct prefix. Is it meth, eth, prop, and so on. Number 3, you check out the position of the functional group, the hydroxyl group. Then number 4, you end the IUPAC name by the suffix -anol, e.g. propanol. Now if the OH group is on the first carbon and there are no other substituent, then do not write the position of the OH group. If the hydroxyl group is on other positions, indicate the positions of the alcohol in between the suffix, e.g. propan-2-ol. Now let's have a look at this example. The first thing is to count how many carbons are there in the long chain. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. That's bute. Now since this is an alcohol, we know the suffix is -anol, so we have butanol. In this case, there's no need to indicate the position of the hydroxyl group since it's occurring in the first carbon and there are no other substituents. A similar example. How many carbons? This is 1, 2. That's eth. Now since this is an alcohol, we have ethanol. Again, no need to indicate the position of the hydroxyl group since it's on the first carbon and there are no other substituents. Now let's have a look at this one. With this one, we can see there are other substituents. We have a methyl group here. Now let's look at the longest chain. How many carbons are there? That's 1, 2, 3. That's prop. Now where are we going to start numbering? From the side that is closest to the functional group, the hydroxyl group. So this is 1, 2, 3. Now, when we give out the name, we have to start with the alkyl group. So that's 2-methylpropan-1-ol. The methyl group is occurring in carbon number 2. Propan-1, this one is indicating that the hydroxyl group is on carbon number 1. Then that's 2-methylpropan-1-ol. Let's look at this one. Now long chain, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's bute again. But we have a situation here. When we start numbering from this side, this is 1, 2. We have a hydroxyl group. From this side, it's 1, 2. We have a methyl group. Now the question is, which one will take first preference? Is it the hydroxyl group or the alkyl group? Now let's look at the rule. It says the hydroxyl group takes precedence over alkyl groups and halogen substituents, as well as double bonds, in the numbering of the parent chain. So that means whenever we number and we see that the hydroxyl group is in the same position with the substituents or the alkyl group, then we have to note that the OH will take first preference, will take precedence over the alkyl group or the halogen substituents. So that means we will start numbering from the side where we see the OH. Note that that only happens when they're in the same position when we number from either side. So this is carbon number 1, carbon number 2, 3, 4. So how are we going to name that one? That's 3-methylbutan-2-ol. The methyl group is on carbon number 3 and the hydroxyl group is on carbon number 2. 3-methylbutan-2-ol. Now let's have a look at this one. Longest chain, how many carbons? That's 1, 2, 3. That's prop. Now where are we going to start numbering? From the side that is closest to the functional group. So this is carbon 1, 2, 3. We have 2 methyl groups in carbon number 2. So we indicate that as 2, 2, then di, because that's 2 of them, dimethyl propan 1 all. The 1 is indicating the position of the hydroxyl group. Let's move along. Now when it comes to naming aldehydes, let's look at these 4 steps. Number 1, count the number of carbon atoms in the long chain. Write out the correct prefix. The position of the functional group, which is the formal group of the aldehyde, is always on the first carbon, so there is no need to indicate the position. Number 4, you enter the IUPAC name with the suffix -anal. For example, butanal. Now let's have a look at this one. How many carbon atoms? That's 1, 2. Our prefix eth. Our suffix -anal. That's ethanal. Now how do we say that it's an aldehyde? Remember, the carbon, the double bond to the oxygen, is always on the first carbon. Let's have a look at this one. How many carbon atoms? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's but. And the suffix -anal. We have butanal. Let's come to the naming of ketones. Number 1, you count the number of carbon atoms in the long chain. Number 2, you write out the correct prefix. Number 3, you check out the position of the functional group, which is your carbonyl group. Number 4, you end the IUPAC name with the suffix unknown. Now you have to note the position of the carbonyl group. Unlike the aldehyde, the carbonyl group must always be indicated only with an exception of the propanone and butanone. The position is indicated in between the suffix. For example, your pentan 2-on. How many carbon atoms do we have here? That's 1, 2, 3. That's prop. And our suffix unknown. There is no need to indicate the position of the functional group. Remember, it's an exception. Butanone, how many carbon atoms? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's but. And the suffix unknown. No need also to indicate the position of the functional group. It's an exception. Now let's have a look at this one. How many carbon atoms? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now that's pent. Let's look at the position of the functional group. Now we will start numbering from the side that is closest to this functional group, the carbonyl group. So this is carbon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we have our functional group in carbon number 2. So the name becomes pentan 2-on. Let's come to the naming of carboxylic acid. Now number 1, you count the number of carbon atoms in the long chain. You write out the correct prefix. Now you have to note the position of the functional group. The carboxyl group of the carboxylic acid is always on the first carbon. So also you do not indicate the position. Number 4, you end the IUPAC name with the suffix anoic acid. For example, butanoic acid. Now with this one, it's simple. How many carbon atoms? There is only 1. That's methanoic acid. How many carbon atoms? That's 2. Ethanoic acid.